the first round, they started shooting through the floor. And the first round was a 223 round out of a AR of some sort, I'm guessing. And it came through the floor and hit me right in the butt. And I remember thinking, damn, they just shot me in the ass.
The Camp Davidians fired 11,000 rounds at all of you, at law enforcement, and law enforcement fired approximately 1,000 rounds. I mean, that's a war.
Bill Buford went back to work weeks after being shot 4 times, but the full story of that day was only half told. Here's the rest of it.
That's a crazy-ass war. And then I want you to paint this picture for everybody, if you would, Bill. You were going up a ladder onto an angled roof to get into a window, which was the gun room, apparently, right?
Yes.
And you entered that gun room, and a gun battle ensued inside there. You just told us that you fired yourself 100 rounds. What kind of weapon were you firing at that moment?
I had a 6-hour 9mm, and I carried almost 50 rounds with me, and I had used all the ammunition. They were shooting through the walls at it.
Right.
And crazy. You're on the roof into the gun room. You're firing 100 rounds. You've got a 9mm handgun, and the slide locks back. And your partner's lying there, and he hands you a magazine. Now, this is something that I picked up, and this is from a more of a tactical perspective. But he handed you a magazine that actually would work in your handgun. And there's always been a debate in law enforcement and different law enforcement agencies that should everyone carry the same weapon for that very same reason, so that if you run out of ammunition, one of your partners can throw you a magazine, where if one guy's carrying a Glock and another's got a Beretta, that's not going to work. And so some agencies mandate that and other agencies don't. Was that policy with the ATF?
It was. ATF issued the 6-hour 9mm to everybody. Back when I first came on, you could carry a personal gun if you qualified with it. But then they did away with that policy, and we all had to carry the 6-hour 9mm. So there was no doubt when Glenn started handing me magazines, I knew what gun he carried. He knew what gun I carried. So it just worked out well.
And, law enforcement, like anybody else, they learn. They learn from experiences. They learn from incidents like yours. That was a prime example of how having the same firearms, you could inter-exchange magazines and help to save each other's lives. You get shot. So I read, and you can confirm this. You got shot a couple of times by an AK-47.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. At least twice with an AK-47 that I know of, right?
Yes.
Are you, each time you're getting hit, are you saying, "Oh my God, fuck me," or what are you thinking? What are you saying? Or is that just enraging you to the point like, I'm just going to finish this? What's the psychology at that moment?
Well, it was the first round. They started shooting through the floor, and the first round was a 223 round out of a AR of some sort, I'm guessing. And it came through the floor and hit me right in the butt. And I remember thinking, damn, they just shot me in the ass. And actually, that one wasn't too bad. But then I took a round in the hip and in the upper thigh. Those were the AK rounds. And they knocked me on my butt. And
on the roof, while you were on the roof?
No, I was still in the room.
Oh, in the room.
And
okay.
Glenn Jordan, one of the other agents in there with me, Glenn he did the break and rake on the window and then followed me in. He had been shot and through the arm and had severed his brachial artery in 2 places. Oh, he was bleeding out on the floor there. And I knew we had to get out of there. That's one reason I kept shooting, because I was going to try to get them to quit shooting at us so I could get Glenn out of there. And finally, Well, what happened? When I ran out of ammunition, Glenn's laying there bleeding like a stuck hog, and he starts pulling out his magazines and handing them to me because he saw the slide lock back on my SIG, and so I used his three magazines of his that he kept giving to me. But and finally, I thought, we got to get out of here. I was trying to get up off the floor, and I remember pushing up on a wooden box. And in that wooden box was hand grenades.
Jeez.
And I thought, man, I hope they don't hit one of these things.
Oh.
And later I thought, why didn't I just pull on the pin and throwing them down the hallway? But I didn't think about that at the time.
No, you had a lot to think about. How the hell did you get back out of that window and off the roof?
I absolutely have no idea. I remember talking to Glenn, and I said, Glenn, we got to get out of here. I said, can you go? And he said, yes. And I said, let's go. And I was trying to get up off the floor. And the next thing I remember, I was on the roof. I have no memory of getting up and going back out the window. I don't remember anything about it.
Huh.
I just, all of a sudden I was on the roof, and I thought, damn, I got to get off of here because they were shooting us. I had Conway LeBlue, a good friend and another fellow agent, was dead right beside me. He had been killed when we first got on the roof. And I crawled over to the edge of the roof, and I was going to do a monkey drop off of the roof. And when I slugged my leg over, I just kept going. Fell down onto some four-wheelers they had parked down below. And a couple of the guys broke my fall, but I broke several ribs when I hit those wheelers. And I thought, oh, damn, they shot me in the chest. This isn't good.
Oh.
And that wasn't the case, but that's what I thought at first.
Right.
What was your most serious injury?
An AK ran to my hip.
Mm-hmm.
And they left the two bullets in there because they said it was too dangerous to try to take them out. The doctor in the emergency room said he couldn't take a piece of paper and put it between the bullet and my femoral artery.
Wow.
Crazy. And
there's pictures.
Did they ever come out?
No, I'm still carrying them.
Still carrying them. Wow. There's
took
pictures, Bill, of you on the front of a pickup truck, I believe, as they were trying to get you out of there after you had gotten off the roof, and your colleagues were trying to help you get the medical attention that you needed. I'm just wondering, were you conscious at that point? Do you remember any of that part of the story?
I don't remember much of it. I was told later that they only had one ambulance. A couple of the guys down at the roadblock down the road commandeered an ambulance that was there and drove up there, and it was full. They didn't have any more room, and I was one of the last ones they picked up. And so they carried me over there and just put me on the hood of that car. And I really don't remember being up there at all. One thing I would like to mention, there was another guy on our team, a team medic, Ken Chisholm. When I was laying on the ground and they started shooting at me, when they creased me across the nose, Ken jumped on top of me and covered me up with his body. Later, I said, Ken, they were shooting at you too, man. I said, why did you do that? He said, I just wasn't going to let them shoot you anymore.
Jeez.
And
crazy.
Then he pulled me over to the side, and actually I was going into shock, and he started an IV on me while we were still getting shot at.
So
how did he know how to do an IV?
He was a medic.
He was a medic.
He was we didn't have
an SRT
specific medics at the time, but he was a paramedic before he came to ATF.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
This is what I love about Heroes Behind the Badge podcast. We're hearing stories today that we would never hear, right? Of heroism at all levels. And that's the beauty of this. I got a question though, because in doing my homework, I heard about there is a little box that you keep near and dear to yourself because inside that box is something very special. Am I getting that story right? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm not sure.
Okay, well, I'll tell you the story I heard, and then you can tell me if it's right or not.
Okay.
I heard that inside that box is a bullet fragment of some sort that was intended for you when you were in the service. I think Vietnam.
Yes.
Perhaps, yes. And
Vietnam.
that somebody put a gun to your head or somewhere point blank, pulled the trigger, and it didn't fire. And somehow you retrieved that slug and put it in a box as a remembrance of your good luck. Does that ring a bell?
No, that's correct.
Okay. I got that one right. Okay.
Good for you, Dennis. Yeah.
I was on operation out of Trebong in Vietnam,
All right.
and a VC popped up out of a spider hole about 10 feet in front of me, maybe 20 feet. And I heard the gun click, and I dumped a 20-round magazine on him and hit him one time out of 20 rounds, but I was a little excited at the time. But I went over and checked the gun, and it was a French MAS 36. I took the bullet out of the chamber, and firing pin had been dented, but I pulled the bullet out of the casing,
All right.
and there was no powder in it. And he had apparently reloaded all of his rounds and forgot to put powder in this one. But I fired about another 10 rounds that he had, and they all fired. I guess God didn't want me to go that day.
Wow.
You got more than 9 lives, I think, my friend.
I don't know that we've ever had a guest here that had these many close encounters.
Unbelievable. Yeah, Bill. So this is a good story, and Dennis has opened the door. So let's go there. I can't believe how you got involved in Vietnam. All right. So what I remember, and you can get into the more details, but you're playing football on a football scholarship at the University of Kansas. And one of your teammates is the Hall of Famer Gale Sayers, right?
Correct.
So you're having a blast playing football in Kansas. And as I recall you telling me, you heard something about Vietnam and something was happening in Vietnam. And you gave up your football scholarship, very pleasant environment there at the University of Kansas. And you decided to sign up and become part of our military and went over to Vietnam. Why did you do that? I still can't understand it fully.
I have a good reason why I did that. My family has had people, uncles and aunts, not aunts, uncles and brothers and things that all were a part of World War II in Korea. And they were my heroes growing up. And I just thought to myself, there's a war going on and I'm old enough to go. I need to do it just because my Uncle Bud and my Uncle Johnny. My Uncle Johnny was wounded at the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. And my Uncle Bud was an artillery unit in Korea, and the gun kicked back and ruined his knee for him when it kicked back one time. And those guys were just always my heroes, and I wanted to try to live up to them. And at that time, they were just starting, or they were getting some information out about the Green Berets, and I thought, I'm gonna go in the Army, and I'm gonna become a Green Beret and go to Vietnam, and that's what I did. It was a stupid decision.
I don't know about that, but then go on from what Craig just asked you to the next chapter of your life and tell the story how you ran into some ATF agents and you didn't even know what ATF was. You asked them. Tell that story, and then how you became an ATF agent yourself.
Yeah, I was living in Lawrence, Kansas. After I got out of the Army, I went back to Kansas to get a degree. And I was working for a private business there, a credit bureau, actually. And there were still a lot of Vietnam War protesters. And on one particular night there, they had put bombs in 7 different buildings in downtown Lawrence and had tried to burn the student union down at the University of Kansas. Well, one of the buildings that they bombed was the building I was working out of. And I went out there, and these two guys were working the crime scene. And I said, "You guys FBI agents?" They said, "No, we work for a living." I said, "Well, what does that mean?" And they said, "We're ATF agents." I said, "What's ATF?" I didn't have a clue. They said, "Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms." I said, "What does that mean?" And they said, "We work guns, whiskey, and explosives." I said, "Hell, I can do that." 30 days later, I was working for ATF.
I got all that, huh?
Wow, crazy.
Sure, Alan.
And you brought something up that's kind of an interesting dynamic in law enforcement. You know, everybody thinks oftentimes law enforcement's one big happy family, but there's always been, you know, a degree of competitiveness, maybe even taking it further beyond that. But you know, you just made the joke about being a real working man versus FBI and ATF, and I have had a very good friend that worked for the DEA, and then I was detached to some federal task force as well. So I know the competitiveness between the federal agencies. My point is here, though, is, you know, ATF started this whole thing with David Koresh and the cult there, the Camp Davidians. But then the FBI took it over. How did you and the ATF feel about the FBI doing that?
Actually, ATF asked the FBI to come in and take over because we felt like we had already had enough bad publicity. And if there was another shootout and we killed a bunch of Davidians, it'd be like we were just seeking revenge. So the decision was made, and I believe it was the correct one, to ask the FBI to come in and take over the perimeter and do the negotiations. At that time, ATF had no trained negotiators. And although I have, regardless of what I said a minute ago about the FBI, I can't say anything bad about what the FBI did at Waco. They worked their butts off and tried to get everybody out of there alive. And what happened eventually on the 19th was not their fault. It was David Koresh's fault.
Well, a couple final questions as we near a close here. Why did you go back to ATF? I mean, you mentioned earlier you were shot 4 times at Waco. You were in the hospital for 6 weeks. You nearly died. And yet, after you got out of the hospital, after you rehabbed, you went back to ATF, and it was only because of a mandatory retirement age that you had to leave when you did. Why did you go back?
I loved the agency, and I loved the people I've worked with. I owed it to the guys that were killed.
You can't ask for more than that. Thinking about Steve Willis, Conway LeBleu, Todd McKeon, Rob Williams, any special remembrances, descriptions of them that you'd like to share with us? Because I love to tell the stories of fallen heroes, and I do it every week in a podcast we do called Heroes Live Forever. What would you say about each of them? I don't know how close you were. I know a couple of them were close friends. I don't know if all 4 were, but any special memories you'd like to share?
Well, Steve Willis was out of Houston. I didn't really know him. I had met him, but that was it. But Conway and Todd McKeon were out of the New Orleans office also. Conway was actually stationed in Baton Rouge. But Conway and I had worked together on the SRT for about 3 years. And I don't know if I ought to tell this, but we, after we'd get through training, we sometimes would imbibe a little bit. Oh. And I remember going to a bar one night, and they were doing shots of tequila where you laid on your back and they just pour a shot in your mouth. And how we got home that night, I don't know. But he was a great guy, very outgoing, had a great family. And Rob Williams was out of my Little Rock office. I actually swore him in on the job. Usually a federal judge does it. And I said, Rob, I'll get a federal judge to swear you in. And he said, no, I want you to swear me in. Okay. So I swore him in, and he was a hard worker. This was a kid that if we got called out on the weekend, we always had one person on duty agent for the weekends. And if something came up, they would respond to it. Or if they needed more people, then they'd call me and I'd get more people out. But I can remember Rob coming into the office one day and he said, "Hey, I hear you all got called out on Saturday." And I said, "Yeah, we went out and I forget what it was we were doing." He says, "Well, damn, why didn't you call me?" He says, "I wasn't doing anything." He said, I'll go. He volunteered for everything. We started an explosives handlers program. He was an explosives handler. When we started the SRTs, or back then the entry control teams, he was the first one to volunteer for that. And the kid just worked 24/7 whenever he could, and such a good guy. In fact, we still do a golf tournament in his honor called the Rob Williams Memorial Golf Tournament. 30-some years later, we've done it every year since 1993. But Rob was involved with Special Olympics, the law enforcement torch run, and he and I ran many a mile through Arkansas together. In fact, earlier he mentioned the monument we were standing in front of, where they took a picture of Rob and I, and that was part of the torch run. We were running the torch through Arkansas at that time. But the golf tournament, half of the money we raise goes to Special Olympics. The other half goes to a scholarship in Rob's name at the University of Arkansas in Little Rock. He was working on his master's degree in criminal justice at the time he was killed. Just the kind of kid you would want around you all the time, because he's just so positive about everything. And it tore my heart out when I saw him get shot.
Oh.
He was about 5 feet from me when it happened.
I can't even imagine.
Here's something. I appreciate those remembrances. That's so special to bring that out so people get to know these fallen heroes.
What can we say to you, Bill, other than a million thank yous for sharing your story on Heroes Behind the Badge? These are the stories, as I said earlier, these are the ones that we don't know. These are the ones that weren't publicized. These are the ones the American public needs to know. Your story and the ones just like it. These are the ones that need to be told and remembered. I can't, I'm really kind of shaken by your phrase. You owed it to the guys who were killed. That is one of the most powerful things I think's ever been said on this podcast. And remembering them the way you have, supporting them by staying in the fight. Well, I don't know. Isn't that the definition of a hero? We think it is. And we thank you on behalf of our nation and all of our fellow Americans for your lifetime of service. Not just ATF, but military, everything that you did, your whole life was about service. And it's very touching that you mentioned the family connection. This was a legacy. This was something that you were destined to do. Thank God for that. Thank God for your family and for you. And let's hope that we have a lot more people like you who see this as their legacy. It's a little harder right now to police than it was in the past. It's never been easy, but right now there's a lot of what floating around that makes it hard. And I will point to this interview with you if anybody doubts going into a life of service in law enforcement. So thank you for sharing it. Very powerful, very impactful, and the public needs to hear this, and now they will. So thank you.
Inspiration.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
If you liked anything that Mr. Bill Buford had to say, and if you didn't, you're not alive, okay? Please subscribe, like, and follow our podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Citizens Behind the Badge. Citizens Behind the Badge is the leading organization in support of the men and women of law enforcement. Citizensbehindthebadge.org. You can find out all about us. You can find out how to get involved and join the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Americans who have signed pledges of support, who have made donations to help in our efforts to advocate on behalf of law enforcement. We would appreciate if you follow us, make comments if you heard something you liked or something you didn't like today. We will see you again on the next episode of Heroes Behind the Badge.